The world of wrestling free agency is an exciting one, and it feels like there is always a bidding war in the world of wrestling. AEW is of course not shy to a bidding war, and just this year alone they signed 10 wrestlers to their roster. And today, since I'm top 10 wrestling, I thought I would grade all 10 of these signings that AEW made with my brutally honest thoughts and tell you what I think of their usage so far in AEW. So enough wasting time, like the video and let's begin. We're starting off with the aerial assassin Will Ospreay, whose signing was actually announced last November in 2023, but his signing didn't come into effect until this year in 2024. And Ospreay has done a lot this year. Of the signings AEW has made, he's definitely been the most active so far this year, with an international title win, in fact 2 international title wins. He had programs with Swerve Strickland for the world title, he fought MJF a couple of times, he is now fighting Carl Fletcher of course, and he's been putting on some banger matches, and AEW definitely have a future world champion here with Will Ospreay. I'm gonna give Ospreay a B, mostly based on his in-ring quality and in-ring work and mic work. In terms of the drawing power, it's not all that there, but I have no doubt that this guy is gonna be a future world champion. Next up we have Deonna Purrazzo, who was signed from TNA to AEW, a former 3-time TNA Knockouts champion. Now I was really excited about Deonna Purrazzo signing for AEW. She's easily one of my favourite wrestlers out there, and she had a good start to the company when she feuded with Toni Storm over the women's title, and though she didn't come out on top, it was a good program. But since then, she sort of just trailed. She had a TV feud with Thunder Rosa, which was good, and they were wrestling most weeks, but eventually that just stopped and faded out, and both of them haven't really done anything since. Deonna is wrestling a lot more occasionally than she was when she first signed to AEW, and she now has a team with Taya Valkyrie called the Vendetta, which is a team that may be looking to grow into a stable, and it is definitely interesting, and I'm looking to see what she's cooking up with that. But for now, I gotta give it right down the middle. I'm giving Deonna in AEW so far a C. Next up, Brian Keith signed for AEW this year. This was a signing that was very exciting to see. Brian Keith a standout on the independent scene, but I gotta say, his usage overall so far hasn't been too great. He's been put with Chris Jericho in the learning tree, which once upon a time would be a good opportunity for a younger indie guy to get in AEW, but right now, it's just kind of damaging his perception almost. And he barely gets used as it is. I can't remember the last time we saw a Brian Keith singles match in AEW. And you know, I'd kind of like to see more. Brian Keith is a good wrestler, but he's just not being used that way. He's just the third man in what is probably the worst stable in the company. Brian Keith in AEW, the Bounty Hunter, gets a D. Next up, we have Queen Aminata, who was signed to AEW this year. And since coming into AEW this year, Queen Aminata has excelled at every role and every spot she's been put in. Queen Aminata has had some really solid matches and really feels like a future star for AEW, and one that in the next year or so they should definitely cash in on. This year can kind of be seen as her introductory year to AEW, and when she was brought in, she was never seen as someone who's gonna get pushed to the moon immediately, and what she has been brought in for, she has absolutely excelled in, and for that reason, I'm giving her the first A of this video. Queen Aminata gets an A. And then next up we have the Rainmaker, Kazuchika Okada. And oh boy, this is a tough one. This was one of the biggest free agents, if not the biggest free agent in wrestling this year. WWE and AEW both gunning for him, and he of course went to AEW for reportedly very big money. Okada has put on good matches in AEW. However, my big issue with Okada is that they just don't use him enough. I'm very glad he's in the Continental Classic because it means we finally get some regular Okada action in AEW, but my biggest problem in Okada for the longest time with how he's been booked in AEW since he got signed is that they just barely use the guy. They spent so much money on this guy and they're barely even using him. He wasn't even booked on Wrestle Dream. This guy is one of the best wrestlers in the world. You're paying him all this money and you don't even put him on pay-per-view. And he's also a champion, and you don't even put him on pay-per-view. Like I said, Okada has had good matches in AEW so far. His run hasn't been bad, it's just been a bit nothing. You know, I'm yet to really see that New Japan Okada so far yet. I'm gonna give it a C. And from C to the CEO, as Mercedes Mone is next up on this list. Mercedes Mone came into AEW having been out of WWE for about a year or two now. It felt like the time was always coming for this or a WWE return, and she opted to go for AEW once again for Big Monet. She won the TBS title in her first match in a great match against Willow Nightingale, and if you watch my video where I review every Mercedes Mone match in AEW so far, you know that I think Mercedes Mone has a pretty good match record in AEW. Her biggest issues were her promo ability, and her pay-per-view matches weren't delivering for a bit, that following her matches with Britt Baker and Hikaru Shida are All In and All Out, but since her match with Statlander at Full Gear, that can be put to bed. For me, Mercedes Mone is one of the best in-ring workers in AEW and in the world, but again, her promo ability so far just hasn't been tip-top I think in AEW, and at times has just felt unnatural and robotic, but her in-ring work is genuinely just elite. I'm gonna give Mercedes Mone a B for her booking in AEW so far. And we go from Mercedes Mone to the woman who was introduced as her bodyguard and muscle, Camille. Camille is a former NWA Women's World Champion, another wrestler I was very excited about when they signed for AEW, and another one who was in a bidding war with WWE strongly contesting to sign her, but AEW got the signature. Camille's run has been weird because when she signed, she sat at home for about 6 months after before they finally brought her onto TV to be Mercedes Mone's muscle. She's picked up some wins, mostly against jobbers, and she's had one loss in her only match against a real AEW wrestler, which was Chris Statlander, and during that feud kind of just got absolutely buried and made to look like a goof, before eventually she was split from Mercedes Mone and is now the victim in a surprise attack angle, and maybe has been written off TV. I have no idea what the status of Camille with AEW even is. Yeah, it disappoints me to say because I like Camille as a wrestler, as a worker, but it's gotta be an F for how she's been used so far in AEW. And then we have Ricochet, who recently left the WWE and debuted for AEW at All In London. Ricochet's run so far, I think it's been fine, but I just haven't seen anything new from him. I haven't seen anything different to what I would have seen in his last year or so in the WWE. He's had some good matches. The match with Ospreay and Takeshita was great, but alternatively, he's had some stinkers there too. The match with Takeshita recently at Full Gear was just not it, man. I've never been into Ricochet's promo ability either. I don't think he's a great mic worker, though he is a very good in-ring talent, that is undeniable. I'm gonna give Ricochet in AEW so far a C. He's only been there for a few months now, hasn't had too much time to breathe and get some proper work in, and obviously he's in the Continental Classic now where he's having fun matches. Time will tell, but so far I'm just not seeing much different with Ricochet than what I've seen for the past couple years, which isn't a problem, it's just nothing new, like I said. Next up is Shelton Benjamin, who signed for AEW having been released from WWE. He had numerous runs in WWE, of course he was the gold standard. He was a part of the world's greatest tag team, or as many of you might know him from, the Hurt Business, who ruled WWE during the pandemic and were a great stable. And since he's arrived to AEW, it feels like we have seen Shelton Benjamin unleashed. Shelton Benjamin has been fully released and is showing us everything he's got. He's another guy who AEW has signed, and you know, you don't expect him to come in there and win world titles and be super heavily pushed. Obviously he's getting older now. I believe he's either 50 or nearly 50, but no matter what, when he goes out there, Shelton Benjamin delivers, and this is the most invested I've been in Shelton Benjamin since the Hurt Business for sure. Shelton Benjamin gets the second A of this video, and he has of course reunited the Hurt Business as the Hurt Syndicate alongside MVP and the newly most recently signed Bobby Lashley. Bobby Lashley quietly departed WWE earlier this year. He's a multi-time world champion there, one of their biggest stars of maybe the last decade there, and here he is now back in AEW alongside his Hurt Business brothers of MVP and Shelton Benjamin, now as the Hurt Syndicate. And Bobby Lashley has had only 2 matches in AEW so far. He squashed 2 jobbers in a handicap match on Dynamite, and then he beat Swerve Strickland at Full Gear in what I thought was a very good match. I'm going to give Bobby Lashley so far a C, just because he's only just started. There's really not much to judge so far, but I will always take seeing the Hurt Business or the Hurt Syndicate on my TV. And then the latest and most actual recent AEW signing, because this is actually an 11-person video, because somehow, someway, I forgot this person, and how could I forget? Big Boom AJ. And Big Boom AJ, of course, not only does he get an A, but he gets one big boom. By the way, Big Boom AJ is a heavy favorite for the Male Wrestler of the Year award in the Top 10 Wrestling Awards, which you can vote on, link down below. Go do it. We're doing an award show video later this month, so go vote now. So yeah, that is all 10 wrestlers that AEW signed this year. Obviously, there's other people that AEW signed, like MVP and Jennifer Pepperman or Carlos Cabrera, but obviously they are in non-wrestling roles right now. So I decided not to grade them, though MVP would definitely get an A from me if he was getting graded, because his mic work has been impeccable. But let me know in the comments down below what you thought of AEW signing so far in 2024. Who do you think was the best performing signing or the worst performing signing from AEW in 2024? And let me know honestly what you thought of my grades towards all of these wrestlers. Was I right? Was I wrong? Sound off in the comments. Like the video if you did enjoy it, like I said. Subscribe with notifications on to see more videos this month from me. See you in the next one. Goodbye and keep on rolling.